Alright guys, this is Elmaster, and today we are going to be talking a little bit about how to play Protoss versus Terran, or PvT as it is commonly known. And we're going to be looking to present a basic build and some general concepts for what you're looking for if you are very new to the game. So in keeping with the theme of this tutorial series, I'm going to be showing you guys a build that is more on the safe side, which generally means higher units, more defensive, a little less economic. So keep in mind that this is a great way to play. It's a great way to learn because it allows you to defend almost any sort of obnoxious play that somebody throws at you while not getting too far behind economically. Keep in mind it won't be 100% optimum, and if someone's playing really economic and you don't do damage, you'll be a little bit behind, but I think when you're learning the game, that's a much better place to play from than always getting attacked and just dying to stuff that you don't know why you just died. They just had more stuff and you don't know if it was because you had bad micro, weren't doing your stuff right, made the wrong stuff, you know, all kinds of reasons. So good, safe, solid way to play PvT. So what we've done is we go ahead and we get a pylon at 8 of 9 like always, just early enough so we don't get supply blocked. We then make a gateway as soon as the pylon finishes on 10, and then we make a gas on 11. As is always the case with most matchups, you don't ever want to stop producing probes to get any of your buildings. So don't stop making probes to get your pylon, don't stop making probes to get your gateway faster, don't stop making probes to get your gas, so on and so forth. The second the gateway finishes, you'll build your cybernetics core, and then after your cybernetics core finishes, you will get a little bit after you start it, you'll get another pylon. PvT, first out of the gateway, a zealot is stylistic, and you can choose to do so. I generally prefer not to, but if you have control and want to do a little bit of zealot harass, it is an option. Completely up to you. So you'll make the cybernetics core as soon as the gateway finishes, and then keep making probes, and as soon as you have money, make a second pylon, again just so you're not getting supply blocked. Basically the key is put the pylon down as soon as you can after making the core while not stopping probes. Always probe, always probe. If you miss probe cycles, you get really far behind economically, and that's all there is to that part. So you're going to make that gateway, and then you're going to start a dragoon as soon as the gateway finishes, and then after you start that dragoon, as soon as you have money, you are going to get dragoon range from the cybernetics core. From this point, as soon as our first dragoon finishes, we will lay down a second gateway, and then we will get a pylon. The idea behind that gateway timing is if you get your second gateway and start it, the second your first dragoon finishes, the gateway build time is very similar to the dragoon build time, so that'll allow your third and fourth dragoons to be produced in sync, which just makes it easier to remember when you have to go back to your gateways and make units. I make a little mistake with my probe there. I was running too far up the ramp. You usually want to run right to the base of the ramp so that if there's marines there, you don't accidentally lose the probe like that. I made another mistake here. I don't know what I was doing with that dragoon, but I totally let that SCV walk up the ramp with a dragoon. I know in another video I've talked about how to make sure you block the ramp with just a zealot. The key is just put it, you'll notice that ramps on this tile set have a little crease, a little V shape right in the middle of the ramp. Put the zealot right where that crease of the V comes together, nothing gets up the ramp. Apparently this time I failed to do it with the dragoon. So you'll get that second gateway, and then you are going to just make pylons and dragoons and of course probes until you have 6 dragoons. And then once your first 2 dragoons are out, you can head down to Terran's base and start to pressure. The key here is I would be cautious of your pressure before you have range finished, because you'll take hits from marines. Once you have ranged finished though, then you can put on a little bit more aggressive pressure. Be careful about going up ramps though, but with range you will shoot farther than marines. So the way you do dragoon micro is you walk and then you hit H, and that'll make your dragoon stop, and if they're in range they'll shoot. So it's basically like a stop and shoot command provided they're close enough to attack. And then you'll back up. Dragoons are a little bit faster than marines, so you'll back up till you're out of range, hold H, get a shot off, back up out of range, hold H, get a shot off, back up out of range, hold H, get a shot off, rinse, repeat. This actually happens to be a really good video for showing why this build is pretty safe, because Terran here is doing a build called a strong FD, which is basically a 2-tank, 7-8 marine rallied vultures attack, and it's generally very difficult to hold off with 1 gate openings because you only have 4 or 5 dragoons at this timing. So here you can see I'm going back, I hit H to shoot, and then I want to move back, and my goal is to not really let the marines hit my dragoons. I'm a little bit concerned here because I am taking a few more tank hits than I'd like. I lost that dragoon, which is a bit sloppy. But I've got more Dragoons coming across the way, and in this case, because I'm still getting attacked, I can keep producing Dragoons. You can see I have the money, so I put down the nexus, and now I can just keep microing backwards. And against an attack like this is what you do. You just micro backwards, watch those vultures, and if the marine count gets low enough or you see the opportunity, diving on the tanks like this is really good, and just go ahead and kill those tanks. The one thing to be careful of is if there's a lot of marines left and you try to dive on the tanks and Terran reacts quickly with pulling the tank back, then you need to back up. If you chase after the tanks and just eat 7 or 8 marines firing at you, you will get completely wrecked. So diving on tanks is great if the opportunity is there, but be careful if Terran reacts quickly and you need to react quickly and not continue that. If you chase a tank too far when there's a lot of marines left, it will go very, very bad for you. And then after you put down the expansion, the key is to go ahead and get your robotics facility right away. And then I am going to show again a pretty safe way of playing, and that is to get 2 more gateways at this point after your natural nexus is mining, and then continue Dragoon production. Basically, the idea behind this is this will allow you to comfortably hold off any of Terran's early attacks. That was a bit sloppy. I didn't re-rally my gate, so I ate a mine and lost a goon. But with 4 gateways, you'll be able to hold off any early pressure if Terran's doing... there's a few dangerous builds Terran can do that provide pressure if you expand really quickly off this. I would probably, myself, a lot of times I would just be expanding twice right now. But this 4-gate style with obs before you take a 4th base or a 3rd base is a pretty safe, comfortable way to play PvT. It'll give you more than enough Dragoons to hold off like a build where Terran gets a factory and then expands and then adds another factory really quick and pushes with a few tanks and rallied vultures. It's generally quite flexible. It sort of lets you adapt to everything, and again, it doesn't put you terribly far behind economically. So once you've produced a round of Dragoons off of these 4 gateways, then you can go ahead and think about expanding, and of course you'll have your obs on the way. And then after you take your... you'll need a second gas too. And then after you take your obs, I would say second gas, you usually want to take your second gas after you put down more than 2 gateways. 2 gateways in a robo you can do with 1 gas, but once you start going to 4 gateways, that is when you need to add that second gas. And so I'm going to go ahead and expand. And then what you'll want to do is when your observer gets to Terran's base, you'll want to take a look for a couple things. First, looking to see if they're taking a 3rd base. So you can fly your observer to the 3rd and or to the top of their main, the part of their main closest to their 3rd base, and just take a look to see if a command center is building. And then once you've looked at that, fly in and see their factory count. That will give you a good idea of their game plan. If you see that they already have like 4, 5, 6 factories, then you need to think about being prepared for a timing attack, because Terran will generally play in one of 2 main ways, and that is to either do a timing attack or to get a pretty fast 3rd base and play a big macro game coming at you with a gigantic army with really big supply. 200 Terran army with upgrades, which is terrifying in its own right. And so against the timing attack, if you get down there and you see timing attack, you need to stop. You need to keep your 3rd, but you need to stop probes for a little bit and get up to about 7 or 8 gateways, get your citadel for speed, and I would also recommend making a shuttle and putting 4 zealots into that shuttle. Then you can then drop those zealots onto the tanks, either before you attack or during your attack, to help the tanks to get on top of the tanks, or to get the tanks to shoot each other and use their own splash damage to kill each other. So we can see here he only has 2 factories when I get there. He's putting down 2 more, so I know at this point he's expanded. I'm going to confirm that, but I just want to see what's going on. So I know now that I'm playing against a Terran that is going for a fast 3rd base. Against this kind of Terran, what you really want to focus on is you don't have to add gateways quite as fast. Generally, you want to keep your gateway count even or marginally ahead of Terrans, maybe 1 gate ahead. But then you really want to focus on getting your tech up quickly. So getting your arbiters out, and if you're in an okay spot, you can go ahead and focus on getting your 4th base up. Against a macro Terran, it's important to take bases. You'd like to have 4 bases, if not 5 or 6, and gateways set up at another base by the time Terran moves out. Because in most PvTs, when you have the first engagement, you are not going to win it outright. Terran is going to beat you back, and you're going to run away, and they're going to have this big army. So the danger is if you have a bad engagement and you only have 1 base, or like let's say 4 bases, but you only have 1 main with gateways, if Terran gets up to your bridge and sieges up at your bridge, it becomes really, really hard to break because you only have units on one side of the map, and there's nothing you can do but throw units at this really fortified defensive Terran position. If you have gateways on two sides of the map, then number one, you have double the production. You can literally be macroing out of 15, 20, 25 gateways if you have the economy for it, which means you can produce a hell of a lot of units, which is helpful. And it also gives you the flexibility to sandwich Terran from both sides. It gives you the flexibility to attack other locations on the map. It's just a much nicer place to play against a 3-base gigantic army style Terran. So priorities against this, again, is getting your 3rd base up and running, taking your 4th base, and especially getting your tech up. That means getting your template archives and your Stargate at the same time, and then adding your Arbiter Tribunal for Arbiters. High Templar can also be utilized. It is stylistic preference in most cases. I generally prefer to go for Arbiters. I think they're a little bit easier to use, but adding Templar in once you have the gas is great. They're quite powerful. You can also make a shuttle, put 3 or 4 Templar in the shuttle, and use the shuttle to help them get into battle a little bit easier. And with the Arbiter, you always want to research almost always want to research Stasis first to defend attacks, and then get Recall. Recall is an amazing spell. Lots of great uses for it. So you can see here I'm sending Dragoons over. I'm taking my 3rd base. And during this phase of the game, basically your goal is just to get Arbiter Tech, bases, and gateways in another base. Beyond that, really the only thing you need to be worried about is defending vultures. So the best way to do that is you can usually have 1 or 2 groups of goons on the maps with an observer. If they're slow, be careful. The goons outrun the observer, so you have to babysit them a little bit. Once you have observer speed, life's all good. But you gotta have 1 or 2 groups of Dragoons out on the map, clearing mines, but you always want to keep some Dragoons kind of back at home, like you've got some here sitting near this bridge. You want to have some back at home, so that if Terran tries to run a bunch of vultures into your main, you aren't totally out of position, and you don't lose all your probes. But you want to generally try to keep mines clear off the map. That's what I'm doing here. I'm just paying attention where his vulture's moving. And then you can also see I've got some obs coverage. You usually want to have obs like kind of in front of the Terran's place where they're going to move out, which is the bridges in this case, and over some of the other paths Terran can walk, so you can get a feel for where the army is moving around to. Vision is really nice in this matchup. Anytime Terran gets free setup in a position, it's really bad for you, because as a Protoss, particularly against a maxed out Terran, you never want to fight once Terran is already sieged. You always want to try to move in for your attack at a time when Terran is unsieged. Moving into a set up tank line with all the tanks sieged up is 9 times out of 10 a very suicidal maneuver. So we can see here I've gotten gateways. I was a little bit behind here, so I did feel the need to prioritize getting up a few gateways in my base before. In an ideal situation, I would like to be taking a 5th and 6th right now and setting gateways up in another base, but I felt the need to get up a big army because he did get a very fast 3rd base and I did not, so I wanted to make sure I had the army out to deal with his first push. And at this point right now, I'm already starting to build up a little bit of money, so I really should have been focused a little bit more on getting a 5th and 6th base and those gateways up in another base. That was something that wasn't so great about this game. And now he's moving out. I've got my obs, I can see that. So we'll talk a little bit about engaging here and what you want to try to do. The key is you want to have your Dragoons clearing out initial mines, and then you sort of want to get your army moving in a line perpendicular to Terran's army, and then run everything in. Now here you can see a lot of tanks are sieged up, right? And I just said don't attack when they're sieged up, and I'm moving in for a big attack. Why? Well, this was a unique case. Terran's army there was these tanks in the front that weren't sieged up, and his army was spread out way in a vertical line across the map. That means tanks way at the back aren't helping the fight. So because he was in this weird line position, the wrong direction, I felt like I could run in there and have a good attack, and fortunately for me it went really well. I don't know if he just didn't have enough vultures or the setup was bad, but this almost never happens in PvT, where you just crush Terran's army and whatever. When this happens, you're in a great position. You should win most of the time if you have an engagement like this. In fact, in the position I was in, if I really would have wanted to, I likely could have just attacked into his natural and won the game right there, but I didn't want to press the issue. I was just trying to show some things, play safe, so I just kind of backed off. Now, most engagements are not going to go that way in PvT. Most engagements will go, you'll move in, and everything will start dying, and you'll need to run away. So how do you do this? Well, you move your army in a line before you attack. 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, move in with the army. And then what you need to do, and this is really, really important, and you have to be attentive to it, the second your zealots are all starting to die, pull the Dragoons back. If you are late with this at all, you will run away, and all you will run away with is about 4 or 5 goons. That's all that will survive, and then Terran will just push and kill you. and it's not pretty. It's very difficult to macro up an army in time to stop Terran if you lose all your Dragoons. And along with that same theme, anytime you go into attack Terran, macro Zealots from your gateways, because the idea is you're not going to let your goons die. You're going to macro Zealots because they build faster and they reinforce faster. And that rule about retreating once your Zealots are dying implies no matter how the battle's going. If you're down to 2 groups of goons and he has 6 or 7 tanks left and a couple of vultures, and you're looking at this thinking, oh, I've got these 18 Dragoons, I can finish off these last 6 tanks. Yeah, you probably can, but you're going to lose all your Dragoons, and then he's going to reinforce, and you're going to be left with almost no army and some reinforcing Zealots against his big reinforcement of vultures, and you're going to get totally wiped out. So anytime your Zealots run out, especially when you're new and don't have a feel for those few times where you can just commit, just run away. The second it looks like you're not going to have enough to break him and your Zealots are dying, run away, retreat, retreat, retreat. Okay, here was really bad. Good teaching moment. Not only was I watching the map too much or not watching the map enough, these vultures ran in. They literally killed all my probes and my natural. This was a terrible, really low-level moment of inattentiveness. Those got a ton of kills. So you can even see I had a wall there, but that's why you always have to be attentive to what's going on, watching that mini-map a little bit. And ideally I should have a cannon or 2 in my natural at this point, and I should have had some units, some Dragoons coming out, something there to block that wall and not allow that to happen. So a combination of inattentiveness and lack of units caused me some major problems. Now finally, this is too slow. This should have happened 2 or 3 minutes ago as well. I am getting gateways up in another base, but I still don't have that macro I wanted. I should have prioritized that. The second I won that attack, this should have been the #1 thing to do. This is really important. Get those gateways in another base ASAPly. I mean, if you're getting attacked, you probably have to focus on getting attacked a little bit before, but once there's a little bit of a lull, make sure you're getting those gateways up in another base. You can see here I'm going to put up like 8 gateways, I think. And then I've remacroed, and then once you have your arbiters out, you always want to have arbiters. That's another good point. If you're going to max out in PvT, when you're getting close to 200, if you are a little bit slow with your arbiters, you didn't make them quick enough, whatever, then wait and don't make an all gateway army. If you make an army that is all gateway units with no arbiters and max out, your army is going to be horrible. You really, really need arbiters or High Templar, or a mix of both. An army with just Zealots and Dragoons, after you get past about 150 supply, is just not good. So add those arbiters in and be prepared to use them. Here I want to recall. I almost had enough energy, but I was like 5 short, so I had to turn away. And then I see his army moving on the map, and I say, okay, I'm already spread out. He's not sieged up, so I'll just go in here for another attack. And again, when you attack, you want to try to go into a little bit of a line, and then sort of spread your army out a little bit to the sides as you're attacking, and then focus on microing your Zealots and getting them to run through and spread out. Like here they're in a clump, so I want to move them left and right and get them to spread out. If they get clumped up, they'll die really fast. And then he just doesn't have enough, so this attack also goes really well, and I think he does go ahead and GG here fairly shortly, or actually I think he's a little bit frustrated. PvT is a frustrating match, or TVP is a frustrating matchup. It's the PvZ for Terran. It can feel really frustrating. So yeah, those are some of the basic concepts, and I'll talk a little bit more and recap here about the general overview of PvT. So I guess the first thing to start with would be, again, just going over the initial build order. So just going overhead and recapping general build order. This is probably the safest way to play PvT without being ridiculous. I mean, there are ways you could be safer, but when you're that safe, you get so far behind economically that essentially you're being so safe, you're just kind of automatically putting yourself into a losing position. So for our build, we get a pylon at 8 of 9 supply. Remember, we don't want to stop making probes really at any point. So we get a pylon, and then we get a gateway at 10, and then we take our gas, and then as soon as the gateway finishes, we get our cybernetics core. And then as soon as you have the money to, without stopping probes, make a second pylon. This should happen at 15. And then you'll want to get your Dragoon and Dragoon range. Then right as that first Dragoon finishes, go ahead and build the second gateway. Immediately start the second Dragoon in the first gateway, and then go ahead and build another pylon. And then you'll be able to produce Dragoons in sets of 2. general rule of thumb, if Terran is playing a normal game, if you see an expansion, early expansion, or it looks like they're doing FD, which is basically where they make 6-7 Marines come down with a tank and rally some vultures or whatever, then you can go ahead and make 6 Dragoons, and then you'll want to put down your nexus. If for some reason you think Terran is being very aggressive, it's okay to pump another round or 2 of Dragoons before you put down the nexus, but against a non-aggressive Terran, against a Terran that's playing for FD into expansion or siege expand or whatever, if you make that many Dragoons and don't do damage, you're going to be really far behind. So 6 Dragoons, put down the nexus, and then get your robotics facility. From there, you have a few choices to how you play. If you really feel like playing economically and a little bit greedy, you can go ahead and immediately make a third nexus. You'll have made your first 6 Dragoons, you'll put down your second nexus, you'll put down a robo, then still without making Dragoons, you'll make another nexus. That's the little bit greedier way to play. It's going to give you an economy that's on par with a Terran, even if he takes a fairly fast third, but it will leave you vulnerable to some timings. The safe way to play, the way I would recommend when you're learning, would be go ahead and add 2 gateways for a total of 4, and then start making Dragoons out of those. And then as soon as your obs is out, send it to Terran's base. If you think Terran is going to attack you soon, it's a good idea to go ahead and make a shuttle from your robotics facility and make 4 zealots to put in the shuttle to shuttle bomb. Other than that, in early game PvT, it's all about Dragoons, Dragoons, Dragoons. They're much better in the early game for defending attacks. Slow zealots just aren't that good. So as a general rule of thumb in PvT, making 4 zealots to put in a shuttle is great, but you want to make between 1 to 2 groups of Dragoons before you switch heavy into zealot production. As another nice little general rule of zealot production, you can start making zealots once you have, assuming you have enough Dragoons, you can start making zealots once you are at about 50% leg speed. If you start making zealots too far before that, like before you have a citadel or before you started leg speed, then you run the risk of getting all these slow lots when Terran attacks, and slow lots are pretty bad against any sort of Terran attack because everything is faster than them and Terran just micros back and you never even get hit with your slow lots. So you'll make 4 gateways and then make maybe a round of Dragoons out of them, and then you can go ahead and take your third base. As you saw in the video, I usually do want to pylon wall that off, at least on one side, so that vultures can't just run in there. And then, of course, you'll want to be scouting for Terran's base, and Terran will be doing one of two predominant ways of playing. One way is to go ahead and add a bunch of factories. So if you get to Terran's base and they already have 4 to 6 factories, then what that tells you need to do, it's one of the rare times you need to stop making probes, get up to 7 or 8 gateways, make sure you've added your citadel and are getting leg speed, and just pump units. Just cut probes just long enough to get the gateways up, then you can start making probes again. If you cut probes too much, then you'll defend his attack, sure, but you'll have a terrible economy and you won't actually be ahead. But if you just do a short probe cut to get your gateways up and then go back to making probes and producing units and defend his attack, you'll be way ahead. Defeating a 2-base attack from Terran when you have 3 bases puts you in a very advantageous position. So that's how to defend that. Again, a shuttle with 4 zealots is great for bombing. 1 to 2 groups of goons, add zealots, get leg speed. Use Dragoons to stall the push if he comes to attack you. So basically when his tanks are unsieged, run in with your goons, start hitting some things. The second you see his tanks start to siege up, run away. If you overstay your welcome, you're going to bleed Dragoons and lose to the timing push. So it's running with the goons. The second he starts to siege up, quickly click away. Got to be paying attention. But of course, it's a little bit tricky because you also need to make sure you don't slip on your macro. If you spend too much time dealing with the fight and forget to make anything in your gateways, your fight will go good at first, and then all of a sudden, Terran will send up a wave of reinforcements, and you'll look back for your units, and there'll be nothing left, and Terran will run over you. So it's important that you're always making units even as you fight. That's hugely, hugely, hugely important. Now, the other thing Terran can do that is probably more common is Terran you'll come into the base and there'll be 2, maybe 3 factories, maybe 4, and you'll look and you'll see a command center building, or there will be a command center at Terran's third base. In this case, they're going to play economic style, and they're usually going to go for 2-1 upgrades and then come out with a large timing push at close to 200 supply with their 2-1 upgrades. For this kind of Terran, you'll obviously, like I said, you'll already have started your third base, so you'll want to go ahead and start expanding more and getting your tech out. This means your citadel should already be down. You should take your citadel shortly after your third, shortly after getting 4 gateways. I'd say once you have, I don't know, about 10 or 12 Dragoons, you should be adding your citadel. Any later than that, and you'll delay zealots too much and delay tech too much. So you see Terran's going for the fast third base. You go ahead and you put down your Templar Archives and your Stargate, And then as soon as those finish, you add your Arbiter Tribunal and start making Arbiters. If you go pure Arbiters, you can go for 2 Stargates. If you're going to use Arbiter and High Templar, 1 Stargate is usually okay. And then you'll want to also be getting your 4th base, clearing the map of mines while keeping a few Dragoons back home to defend, and then working on taking a 5th and 6th base and getting gateways up at another main if it is a 4-player map that allows it. If it is not a map that allows it, then just build as many gateways as you can fit in. Try to think about nice, neat gateway placements, but build as many gateways as you can in your base to defend. You want at least 15 gateways, if not more. Just build them wherever you need to, because you need that kind of production to deal with Terran's army. You're going to lose most of the fights. Basically, the idea is that Terran's army is stronger, but Protoss wins by having a much larger economy and just having so many units all over the place that Terran has a hard time keeping up. So if you just have 8 gateways, 9 gateways in one base against his 9 factories, hard game for you. You need a lot of production to play late game PvT. That's why getting that second main secured quickly and getting gates up there quickly is great. I would say in an ideal world, if you're playing really economically, you're looking for somewhere between, 13 and 14 minutes to have 8 gateways or more set up at a second base and 8 gateways or more in your main base. If you are later than, 16 to 18 minutes, then you're likely to have problems, because Terran is usually going to come out at about, depending on just how economic they've been and how the game has unfolded, they're usually going to do their attack somewhere around 14 to 16 minutes. So if you don't have any more gateways a minute or two past that, you're going to have a hard time, because you're not going to win that first battle 9 out of 10 times, and then you're not going to have the reinforcements you need. So again, against the 3-base macro Terran, you want to, first priority, I would say, if you had to prioritize, is make sure you're getting your Arbiters out. Make sure you're maxing and have 1 or 2 Arbiters when you max. Don't max with just Zealot and Dragoon. That's priority number 1. Priority number 2 is getting up that 4th base, continuing to probe up. General rule is if you make perfect probes, you can stop probes around 120, 130 supply. If you know you've missed probes, keep making a few more. But you're looking for around 70 probes, which should give you an army of 4 to 5 control groups in size. If your army is way bigger than that, if you get to 200 supply and you've got 6 or 7 control groups, not enough probes. If you get to 200 supply and your army is 3.5 control groups, you probably want to suicide some probes, because that army is just going to be too small. So priority number 1 is getting that teching up to Arbiters. Priority number 2, securing additional bases and probing. Priority number 3, they're almost all equal priority, but priority number 3 is getting that additional main secured and putting up a boatload of gateways in a second main. So yeah, and then I guess we'll real quickly talk about engagements. I already talked about how to do a timing push. If you're fighting the big Terran army, the main keys here are do not attack when he's already sieged up. Especially don't attack if he's already sieged up and has a bunch of mines in front of his tank line. You can't do it. If you get into a position where Terran, either you didn't pay attention or something went wrong, and Terran is walked up to your base and they are about to siege your 5th base, and there's a whole minefield set up there and he's got a bunch of siege tanks sieged up, you just don't want to fight. You need to go around, clear out mines somewhere else, think about a counterattack. Arbiters have a spell called Recall, which lets you pull a group of units anywhere on the map. Go Recall as 3rd base, Recall as main. You'll need to find something else, because if you attack into an army that's well set up with mines and siege tanks, you're just going to burn all your units and get nothing out of it. You'll lose most of your Zealots to the mines and then immediately be pulling back with your Dragoons. And then when you go in for the attack, you hopefully catch him unsieged without too many mines. You want to move your army perpendicular to his so it gets going in a nice line. And then you 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A at the center of his army. Make sure you're not actually able to have vision of his units and clicking on them. Otherwise, all your units will be obsessed with attacking that one. Just 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A into the fog of war. And then that way your units should come in a big arc. If your units come in at his army in like a straight line, it's going to go really bad for you. So you need to be moving perpendicular to his army so you come in one nice smooth arc and everything is kind of attacking from once. Then when you micro the fight, order of priority for how to do the fight is casting Stasis or Storm with the Templar is the first thing. If you have not too many of those to cast, or you've already casted them, then I would say focus on getting your Zealots through and spreading your Zealots. Zealots, when you move them in, have a tendency to cluster up at a few of the early Vultures, and if you get this big cluster of 20 Zealots, they'll eat huge amounts of tank fire and all just vaporize right away. So you want to kind of spread them out, move them left, right, move them in, run them into the tank lines if there's not too many vultures, that kind of stuff, just so they're not clumped up in a ball. And then, again, I can't emphasize enough, the second you are losing your zealots, I don't care how the fight looks, if there's 4 tanks and you have 18 dragoons and your zealots are gone, just run away. Run away when you're learning. It is going to be much better for you. And then when you're fighting Terran, macro only zealots, because you're trying to keep those dragoons alive, and the zealots build way faster and reinforce way faster. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers. Also in PvT, let's say think about that game that I just played. Let's say he would have sieged his way up. He's sieging the left side of my map. He's sieging my 5th and 6th base. He got his tank sieged up with a bunch of mines. I can't attack there. It's just not a good attack. Well, what should I be doing? While you're getting attacked, always be expanding. So I would expand to the bottom right-hand corner of the map in that game I just played and start putting up gateways over there, setting up over on that side. Always be expanding. That makes things really hard for Terran. Terran's strength is to be in one spot powerfully. They have a hard time going everywhere, and by keeping those expansions up, you'll be much more mobile and you won't dry up out of money. And yeah, and again, if you can't attack the Terran army, then think about other ways to move around. Move around, threaten to attack into his main base, recall, just figure out something to do rather than a really suicidal attack into his army. And I think that pretty much covers basic concepts for this matchup. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.